be screwed, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 9th part of What If Aizen Finds BEN10 in Bleach Verse. Special note, this fanfic is written in the masterpiece of Bigby the Big Bad Wolf on fanfictionnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Later that day, or what qualified as that day, Villian was still excited about what had happened. "This is so cool," she said as she paced across the room excitedly. "We know, Villian, we heard you the first time," Stark grumbled as he tried to fall back asleep. Villian looked ready to explode on her other half, but surprisingly gave him a dismissive wave of her hand instead. "Not up for punishing him, Villian?" Ben joked as he sat upon his bed. "I'm too excited to let him get me down," Villian said as before putting her hands on Ben's shoulders and smiling at him. "You're awesome, Ben." "Well, I already know that, but please, don't stop on my behalf," Ben said, grinning at Villian. "Hey," Villian snorted, giving him a light slap on the back of the head. "Don't get too full of yourself." "Oh," Ben rubbed his head. "Oh, so I'm your new victim instead of Stark now." "Would be a nice chance of pace," Stark muttered from his cushions. Ben made a face at the primer espada. "You're still mad about the whole water hazard thing, aren't you?" "Mad? No," Stark answered. "A bit annoyed, sure." Ben just rolled his eyes but smiled regardless. Though the smile didn't last and Villian noticed this. "What's wrong, Ben?" she asked in concern. "Oh, I'm just thinking, Villian," he replied in kind. "Hey, I'm gonna go for a walk. Is that all right?" Stark looked over his shoulder. "Where are you going?" "Just to the courtyard," Ben told him. Both Stark and Villian stared at him in confusion, wondering why he wanted to be out there yet again. "You want me to go with you?" Villian offered. "No thanks, Villian. I kinda want to be alone right now." Both Stark and Villian were taken aback by this request. "Are you sure?" the former asked. "Don't worry, I'll be careful," Ben reassured him. Stark just stared at him for a moment before sighing. "All right." Villian rounded on him. "All right? Is that all you have to say?" "If Ben wants to do something on his own, then that's his choice," Stark told her with a hint of sternness in his tone that took her by surprise. "Besides, he said he would be careful." "Seriously?" Villian screeched. "You're just going to let this happen even though Luppy and Neutra, Grimjow and possibly Berrigan are after him?" "Don't worry, Villian," Ben said as he put a hand on her shoulder. "I promise, I will be careful." Villian scrunched her face up in annoyance, wanting to argue against this decision. But she saw that Ben was set on it and Stark didn't seem to care. Instead, she crossed her arms and gave Ben a deep scowl, her way of saying, "Fine." Ben gave her a pat on the shoulder before heading out of the room. Once he was outside, Ben made his way to the oasis. He had to admit, it was an impressive sight, and one of the few times he had ever used his aliens in such a creative way. Ben admired his handiwork for a moment before sighing. He walked over to one of the trees and sat down in its shade. "Am I doing the right thing?" Ben questioned himself, looking up at the artificial sky. "I still don't know if Aizen's a good guy or not. Problem is that he's just so charismatic. Heh, Michael Morningstar could learn a few lessons from him." Ben frowned. "And if he's the bad guy, then is what he said about the Soul Society true? Or are they both bad? I need to find out what's really going on and what I might have to do when I find out." Somehow. Ben just sat there with his thoughts. Ben wasn't sure how long he had been sitting there, but he soon heard the all-too-familiar sound of feet moving through the sand. A lot of feet. Something in Ben's head was screaming danger, so he quickly sat up. Approaching the oasis was none other than Berrigan himself, accompanied by his Fraxian. Ben shot to his feet. When they finally noticed him, the group stopped their approach. Well, Berrigan said in that deep, gruff voice of his. "Ben Tennyson, I don't believe we've ever had a proper conversation between us, have we?" "Can't say that we have," Ben said tensely. Now, said one of the Fraxian, a tall blonde-haired man whose face was completely covered by his mask. No need to be so edgy. We're not here to cause trouble. But if you're looking for trouble, said one of the Fraxian. He was a young man with a feminine face, sporting scruffy black hair and mask remains on top of his head that resembled the skull of a saber-toothed tiger. We'll gladly give it to ya. Ben narrowed his eyes before looking over at Berrigan. Is there something I can help you with? Yes, actually, Berrigan said briskly before looking at the oasis. I wasn't expecting you to be here, but I find this too good an opportunity to pass up. I admire your ingenuity, boy, and I do not give praise lightly. Your powers and skill do make you a formidable warrior. The fact that you have managed to defeat 2 of the Espada is proof of that. Ben's hand twitched, eager to activate the Ultimatrix and go alien at a moment's notice. As such, Berrigan continued, I want my Fraxian to spar with you. Ben was floored by this sudden request. You do? Then he immediately went back on guard. Sure, Berrigan was suggesting his Fraxian instead of himself, but he honestly wouldn't be surprised if they were trying to establish their supposed superiority just like Enoitra, Grimjow, and Luppy had. The boss wants us to be prepared for fighting the Soul Society, Berrigan said. And what better way for us to do so? Or do you have your hands full training with Haribal's Fraxian? Ben caught the way that Berrigan practically spat out her name. Some bad BLD between them. Maybe when Berrigan used to rule, he had openly encouraged attacking female hollows. From what Ben remembered regarding Berrigan's past comments, he could see the Arankar doing something like that. Don't blame you though, said a large Arankar with his mask remains resembling a short, tusked helmet, letting out a lecherous chuckle. Ben frowned at him. Surely you can spare some time for us, the masked, blonde-haired man said amicably to Ben. You have faced Espada and won, spoke the tallest of Berrigan's Fraxian, towering over even Yami. He had short hair, triangular lines with inner circles on each cheek, his mask remains resembled horns sticking out from his chin, and his outfit resembled more of a Chinese robe compared to some of the other outfits. We like to witness your power for ourselves. Indeed, spoke a member of Berrigan's Fraxian that made him blanch. He was dark-skinned with long wavy lavender hair and an outfit that exposed his midriff, complete with mask remains that resembled a small tiara on top of his head. We all know about your incredible adventures and heroic deeds, but we haven't seen you in action yet. He smiled at Ben in a way that made him think of Shale as a shiver ran down his spine. Man, shouted the last member of the group, a muscular man with red tattooed lines running across his bare chest. His mask remains taking the form of a beaked helmet. Just the thought of facing a guy who took on the Espada is getting me so pumped up. As you can see, BEN10, Berrigan said in amusement. My Fraxian are very eager to test themselves against you. Do you see a problem with this? Ben was in a tight spot, that was for sure. He was still certain that Berrigan had an ulterior motive. Seriously, how many times was he gonna have to defend himself under the pretense of sparring here? That aside, Ben was used to fighting multiple opponents, but he wondered how well he would last if they all ganged up on him, let alone Berrigan himself jumping in. But he was also worried that if he tried to make a run for it, it was just going to make matters worse. Ben decided he would go along with this for now until he managed to get an opening to escape. Maybe, if he pushed these guys strong enough, they might activate their released states. That would be sure to draw Aizen's attention, or at least Stark and Haribal's. All right, he said finally. Let's do it. Berrigan smiled and Ben thought it made him look devious. Good. Now, which of you should face Ben first? He looked his Fraxian over. Ah, Charlotte, go. Ben had a good idea which one was Charlotte, and he was not disappointed as the one with long lavender hair leaped over the other Fraxian towards him. Here, 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 Charlotte chanted as he clapped before twirling like a ballerina was he made his descent. I'm here, he struck a pose as his feet touched the ground. Lord Berrigan's #1 Fraxian, Charlotte Chulauern. He then winked at Ben, who fought to keep a straight face. Several of the other Arankar snickered at this. You'll have to excuse Charlotte, the blonde-haired Arankar said. He can be quite theatrical. Noted, Ben replied. Quickly, he activated the Ultimatrix and slammed the dial down. When the green light passed, he had transformed into Chromastone. Let's do this. My, Charlotte said as he drew his sword. I can tell this is going to be fun. He leaped high into the air, surprising Ben with his leg strength. Then Charlotte began spinning downward towards him, screaming at the top of his lungs as he did so. Appealing Charlotte Chulauren's miracle sweet, ultra funky, fantastic, dramatic, romantic, sadistic, RTC, exotic, athletic, guillotine attack. Chromastone was too busy being baffled by the extremely, and needlessly, long attack name that it didn't occur to him to defend himself until Charlotte was right above him, his sword raised for a downward slash. Chromastone had just enough time to block the blade with his arms, but was caught off guard when the sheer force behind the slash brought him to his knees. Whoa, Chromastone grunted. You're pretty strong. Charlotte let out a throaty giggle as he pressed his blade against the hero's arms. Don't underestimate me just because I'm not one of the Espada, BEN10. Chromastone grunted as he tried to push the blade away. I'll keep that in mind, he shouted before managing to push Charlotte away, seizing the opportunity to dash forward. He threw a punch that Charlotte blocked, the Arankar retaliating with a slash of his sword that struck Chromastone's crystalline body to no effect. Chromastone responded to that with an uppercut, but Charlotte dodged out of the way just before his opponent's fist could connect. He in turn opted for a spin kick at Chromastone's head, but the hero ducked and fired a blast of light. The beam knocked Charlotte back, but the Arankar flipped back onto his feet just before touching the desert sand. Chromastone took a fighting stance, narrowing his eye at his opponent. So this guy was pretty skilled, made sense considering he was a Fraxian of the second Espada. Ben wondered how good the other guys were and how they ranked amongst each other, unless there was some truth to Charlotte being the number one. Not bad, Berrigan said, crossing his thick arms together. But I think this fight could be a little more interesting. Chromastone tightened his fists, expecting the worst. Considering that Ben is a match for the Espada, Berrigan went on in a way one would act as if talking about the weather. Perhaps sending only one of my Fraxian against him is an insult to his skills. Our hero deserves more of a challenge. Redder, you and Charlotte will both fight Ben at once. Chromastone was tempted to swear. So this was his plan. Have his Fraxian gang up on him? Yeah, Redder, the one with the tattoos and beak-like helmet, screamed as he began pumping himself up. Gonna hurt ya, gonna hurt ya, gonna hurt ya, when he noticed that Chromastone was just staring at the display before him. Hey, what's wrong with you? Chromastone muttered. Redder, must you always be so uncouth? Charlotte sighed dramatically before addressing Chromastone. I apologize, Ben. Redder likes to do a pre-battle ritual, where he and his opponent shout what they're going to do to each other before fighting. He claims it gets the fighters excited for the actual battle. It does work, Redder shouted at his teammate before looking back at Chromastone. Come on, gonna hurt ya, gonna hurt ya, gonna hurt ya. Chromastone just continued staring at him, having a strong feeling that this guy might actually get along with Wrath, and that alone was a horrifying thought. Come on, an aggravated Redder demanded. Do it. Redder, Berrigan barked at him. Just fight. Redder flinched at his leader's words. Why yes, Lord Berrigan. Forgive me. Suddenly he used his Sunito to appear right before Chromastone, who had no time to defend himself before Redder hit him with such a powerful punch that it sent him flying backwards into the lake. He quickly broke the surface, glaring at the sudden attack. Ha, Redder cheered. See? This is what you get for not joining me. I bet if you did, you might have blocked that. Not bad, Redder, Berrigan said loudly, even for Chromastone to hear despite being in the lake. Why don't we continue to make this more interesting? Chromastone frowned. Now what's he up to? He whispered to himself. How about you two release yourselves? Berrigan implied rather than suggested. Oh great, Chromastone grumbled. I probably should have seen that coming. Redder has a large grin on his face as he turned toward Charlotte. Sounds good to me. What do you think? Well, His Majesty did command it, Charlotte added. And besides, this will allow Ben10 to witness more of my great beauty. Chromastone quickly floated out of the pool, wondering what was going to happen next. Sparkle, Charlotte cried as he held his sword out in front of him. Smoke started pouring out from the blade. Reina de Rosas? He then winked before striking a pose as a violet light covered him. Redder pulled out his sword and held it out horizontally with both hands. Scap, his body started emitting a crimson light. Aguilla. Power exploded from the two as they were engulfed in clouds of smoke. Chromastone struggled against the combined power, threatening to launch him back into the lake. Soon the smoke started to part, revealing his opponents. Redder's appearance was very different. He now resembled a large, humanoid eagle with bright red feathers. His mask remains now merged with his head. Charlotte, on the other hand, Chromastone had to rub his eye fiercely to make sure he was not seeing things. Charlotte had not changed much in terms of body appearance, but his clothes sure had. They left a lot of skin open, his outfit resembling something akin to a ballerina. He wore a pink miniskirt with very visible underwear, with a pink heart outline just above the garment, with a smaller heart outline on top of the first. He also wore a CRP top with shoulder pads resembling wings, complete with a short, flowing cape. He had disc-like bracelets around his wrists and ankles. A horn tiara perched upon his head completed the look. "Behold," Charlotte said as he struck another pose. "Our true power." "You may have beaten OMNITRIX," Redder shouted. "But do you think you can defeat two released Arankar at the same time?" Chromastone growled as he took another fighting stance in the air. "Let's find out." Redder chuckled. "Good, you still got fight in ya. Glad to see you're not chickening out." He suddenly aimed his wings toward Chromastone and fired his feathers. The hero quickly created a barrier around himself just in time to block the barrage. The feathers collided loudly against the barrier, ricocheting off and landing everywhere. Some landed in the lake while others punched through some of the trees. "Hey!" Chromastone shouted angrily. "Watch it!" He lowered the barrier and fired a blast at Redder, who quickly sidestepped the incoming attack. "My turn," Charlotte announced before doing a variety of poses. Appealing Charlotte Chulauren's final holy wonderful pretty super magnum sexy glamour zero. He finished this by putting his hands together into a heart shape, firing off a pink zero far bigger than any Chromastone had seen so far. His eye widened when he saw that thing could possibly cover most if not all of the oasis. Quickly he shot forward and stuck his arms out, focusing on absorbing the zero. Despite the power and size of the zero rapidly diminishing, Chromastone found himself straining. He was trying to absorb all the energy to avoid the plants being damaged, but he wasn't sure if he could do it in time. Then he was struck by an idea. Instead of absorbing the energy, he channeled it through his body and out his horn, sending the attack right back at his opponents, as well as Baragon and the remainder of the Fraxian, who all scattered to avoid the attack as it blazed across the desert. Chromastone let out a big sigh of relief when he saw that he managed to save the plants in time. "You idiot!" the saber-toothed Arankar shouted at his teammate. "You knew he had an alien that can absorb zero. Why did you fire one at him?" "I didn't know he could redirect the zero as he was absorbing it," Charlotte called back to him in embarrassment. "That was very clever," the blonde Arankar said. "Charlotte's zero has the widest range out of all the Arankar. The fact that Tennyson was able to stop all of it is quite impressive." "We all know how clever he is," Findor, the largest of the Fraxians, said. "Charlotte needs to quit messing around and just fight the guy," the saber-tooth Arankar said before addressing Baragon. "Your Majesty, please let me fight the human." "That won't be necessary, Viga," Baragon told him. "Charlotte and Redder will be more than enough for him, especially when they decide to fight seriously." "A pity," Findor said, putting a hand on the rapier at his side. "I was hoping to test my skills against the boy too, but I suppose it can't be helped." Baragon chuckled. "I don't recall saying you all wouldn't get a chance to fight him. I just didn't say when." The other members of Baragon's Fraxian chuckled to themselves as they resumed watching the battle. "Not a bad trick," Redder said as he and Charlotte stood beside each other. "But I know that's not all you can do. Show us the power that defeated OMNITRIX. Show us these ultimate aliens we've heard about." Chromastone slouched in midair. "Should have known," he muttered. "I already warned you not to underestimate me just because I was a Fraxian," Charlotte reminded him. "That goes the same for all of us." Chromastone frowned. These two were decently tough, and they didn't seem to care about the damage they might do to the oasis. Why? Were they confident that Ben would preserve it? Or did they not really care about what would happen? It didn't matter. Ben realized that fighting these guys might damage the oasis, so he couldn't risk doing that. But just as he was about to reach for the dial, He froze at the suddenly serious look on Charlotte's face. I wouldn't mind extending this fight just a little bit longer, the effeminate Arankar said in a low tone with a hint of steel in it. But I don't want to waste Lord Barrigan's patience. Chromastone tensed up, sensing that something really bad was about to happen. Oh, gonna go ahead and do it, Charlotte? Redder asked his teammate. That's right, Charlotte said. Behold, BEN10, my most appealing and most deadly attack, Rosa Blanca. Chromastone prepared to defend himself but was caught off guard by what was actually happening. Instead of a direct attack, something began rising up around them. They looked like thorny vines, merging together in a mass of darkness. Chromastone looked around and saw that the thorns were emerging from all over the oasis. They seemed to rising up, branching out, and spreading towards each other. Chromastone's eye widened when he realized that the vines were merging together to form another large dome, similar to Tozen's. When the dome closed, a large white rose bloomed from the top, its bright petals a contrast to the perpetual darkness that otherwise surrounded them. At least this one didn't rob the hero of his senses. So what did it do? Charlotte had a calm smile on his face, but there was a bit of smugness to it. You are finished now, BEN10, my cruelest attack. You will fall here, unable to be seen, heard, or sensed within my thorns. That's it? Chromastone asked in confusion. That's all it can do? Not really much of an attack. Charlotte gawked while Redder laughed uproariously, even clutching his sides. Don't underestimate Rosa Blanca, Tennyson, Barrigan said coldly. It may not seem to be much in terms of offensive power, but it does have its uses. For example, he snapped his fingers. One by one the rest of his Fraxian were beginning to draw their Zampicudo. Chromastone grit his teeth. So that's it. You had Charlotte use this Rosa Blanca thing so you could all gang up on me. Barrigan let out a mighty bellow of laughter at the accusations. Findor, Vega, and Parduauk were amused while Paua remained completely nonplussed. A very clever tactic, I will admit, the second Espada said. However, this was never about you, Tennyson. Chromastone did a double take. Wait, what? Barrigan snorted before leering at him. Didn't I say that I wasn't expecting you earlier? I meant it. You are unique, I will admit. But in the end, you are a measly human with a flashy little tool. That is nothing compared to the power I wield, and therefore you are not even remotely a threat to me. A nuisance due to your spreading popularity perhaps, but not a threat. Chromastone growled under his breath. Barrigan really was full of himself. He'd hate to see what would happen if Barrigan was in a room with the likes of Vilgax, Michael, and possibly Agrigar. Now then, Barrigan addressed his Fraxian. Men, get rid of this eyesore. Chromastone gasped when he realized that Barrigan was talking about the oasis. Yes, sir, Lord Barrigan, his Fraxian declared as one. They moved to attack but stopped when Chromastone fired a beam in front of them. I won't let you do this, he declared, only to be pelted by more of Redder's powerful feathers. It felt to Chromastone like he was being pelted with stones as the barrage blasted him out of the air and into the water. He quickly flew out. Stop, he yelled before hitting the Ultimatrix dial again, transforming into Big Chill. What's this? Redder asked in amusement. A bug to fight a bird? Something like that, Big Chill responded before turning intangible and flying at them. Both were too surprised by this unexpected move that they weren't ready as Big Chill flew through them, their sides being encased in ice. What? Redder cried. Barrigan's eye widened, but he and his Fraxian were unable to do anything as Big Chill flew above them, unleashing his ice breath. They let out cries of shock, frustration, and anger as ice began to form on their bodies. That ought to cool you down, Big Chill joked. Now then, he looked at the thorns encompassing the oasis. I need to get rid of that Rosa Blanca thing. He began flying towards Charlotte when he felt an overwhelming pressure forcing him down. The sound of shattering caused him to look to the side, spotting the ice around Barrigan breaking into shards, and he looked furious. Big Chill tried to go intangible again, but Barrigan increased the force of his spiritual pressure, pinning him to the ground. He strained to push himself up against the change in weight, only for a large hand to grab him by his head and hoist him into the air. A dangerous ability, Paua noted as he studied his captive. But it seems you have to concentrate to use it. He began to squeeze Big Chill's cranium, causing the hero to cry out in pain. But then Pawa was the one to cry out in pain as BLD gushed out of his chest, releasing Big Chill in the process. "What?" Barragan cried out before 4 new figures appeared before his group. "You!" Rubbing his now sore head, Big Chill looked up to see none other than Harable and her Fraxian, weapons drawn. "Harable? I found it suspicious to sense 2 of your Fraxian releasing themselves." "Barragan," Harable asked evenly, her eyes fixed on him. "And my suspicions were correct." But," Charlotte stammered, staring at the 4 females in disbelief. "How did you get through my Rose Blanca?" "Please," Apache sneered. "We were here the whole time. The moment we sensed you and Redder releasing, we decided to investigate. We were ready to jump in just in case Ben needed help, but he was doing great." This earned her a glare from Redder himself. But then when Charlotte went and used this creepy attack. "We apologize for just now intervening," Sung Sun told her newfound friend. "But you were doing so well against them that we weren't sure if you truly needed our help." "At the moment," Big Chill said as he stood up. "I'm not complaining. Much." Sung Sun just gave him a light smile in response. "See, creepy?" Charlotte shrieked. "How dare you insult my most appealing technique?" Now it was Mila Rose who scoffed with a shrug, eyeing the thorns. "I've seen better." Charlotte ground his teeth, his fists were clenched, and it looked like a vein was bulging on his face. "We heard everything," Barragan, Harable said, diverting everyone's attention onto her. "You wished to destroy this oasis under the pretense of your Fraxian sparring. Why would you do this?" HMPH, Barragan crossed his arms, suddenly looking more relaxed despite being confronted by a fellow Espada. "That is none of your concern, Harable. This is a foundation that was established by Lord Aizen to improve life here in Hukomundo, and you would destroy it." Harable raised her sword at him. "That makes it my concern." Barragan eyed her with contempt. "Improve life in Hukomundo? With these handouts?" He clenched a thick fist, raising said appendage as it shook with rage. "The law of Hukomundo has always been survival of the fittest. Kill or be killed. It's what has separated the strong from the weak. And now a rogue Shinigami has condoned this?" He swept his hands across the oasis. "Where the weak can be given power on a silver platter instead of earning it." Harable's brows furrowed. "You wish to destroy the oasis simply because it is an insult to such a barbaric philosophy." Barragan chuckled. "Barbaric? Despite our differences, you have always intrigued me, Harable. So powerful yet so willing to defy the natural law of our lands." He raised a hand when Harable seemed ready to speak. "Spare me. I know all about your philosophy of sacrifice. It is your aspect of death after all." "Aspect of death?" Big Chill asked. "Later," Mila Rose replied. "Lord Barragan," Vega said to his lord. "What do you wish to do?" Barragan eyed Vega, causing said Arrancar to flinch. His face was impassive, but even Big Chill could tell he was annoyed. "Harable's presence changes nothing," Barragan said coldly. "We are still under the power of Charlotte's Rose Blanca. Aizen won't know a thing. Back away!" He barked at his Fraxian, causing all of them to flinch and stare at their leader in disbelief. He shot Harable a smile that made her tighten the grip on her sword. "These 4 will obviously stand in our way, so I shall deal with them." Harable's Fraxian all stared in shock at this declaration, but quickly resumed their fighting stances. "You really wish to fight, Barragan?" Harable asked edgily. "How do you think Lord Aizen will feel when he learns about what you have done?" "Aizen won't know," Barragan said firmly. "This will be treated as a simple sparring accident gone out of hand." His eye remained fixed on Harable. "We won't kill you or your Fraxian, Harable, but we are going to make sure you get the story straight." "And how do you plan on doing that?" Harable asked coolly. Barragan raised a hand and tightened it into a fist, the message perfectly clear. This caused Big Chill to clench his own fists in disgust. Then he was struck by an idea. They had to get rid of Rosa Blanca somehow. If they could do that, everybody would know what was going on, and maybe Aizen and Stark could put a stop to this. "Ladies, Ben," Harable said firmly, "keep an eye on Barragan's Fraxian. I will hold him off alone." Her Fraxian stared at her in disbelief. "Lady Harable." Apache started to object. "We can't take chances," Harable told her. "Barragan may order them to destroy these plants regardless. I won't let him destroy this chance for Mundo. Haribel's Fraxian were upset at their leader's demands, but they didn't want to let her down. Yes, Lady Haribel, Miller Rose responded. Big Chill looked back and forth between the two groups in concern. On one hand, if they could break the Rosa Blanca, they could foil Berrigan's plan. But on the other hand, if they could defeat Berrigan, they could probably scare his Fraxian into backing off. Haribel understandably wanted her Fraxian out of the way, but maybe. I'm helping you, he decided, causing all four girls to stare at him. Ben, Sung Sun said. Ben, no, Haribel said sternly. I already warned you about Berrigan and I'm not letting you face him alone, Big Chill said just as firmly. Taking him down is one of our best options for saving this place. That is true, Haribel acknowledged, but Oh, what confidence, Berrigan chortled. So you think that because you beat Enoitra and Luppy that you are a match for me, boy? Big Chill smiled at Berrigan. I understand if you're afraid of me, Berrigan. All amusement left Berrigan's face as he eyed Big Chill angrily. His Fraxian looked outraged. What did you say? After all, Big Chill went on, I did beat Tu Espada. I wouldn't blame you if you felt threatened by me. Berrigan's body began to shake. Me? Threatened? By the likes of you? His spiritual pressure flared, taking the shape of a red aura around his body. Big Chill struggled to deal with the pressure. Come at me, boy. Have Haribel help you if you wish, it won't make a difference. See how truly weak and feeble you are compared to me. Then, please, Haribel tried again. Don't worry, Haribel, Big Chill said confidently. Between the two of us, Berrigan doesn't stand a chance. Haribel sighed, shaking her head. I can see now that there is no point in arguing with you. Very well, we shall fight together. Then, Mila Rose said softly. How interesting, Findor said. Pointless, Paua said. Haribel may be the third Espada, but she doesn't stand a chance against Lord Berrigan. How about we start destroying this place already? Pardrak asked. Don't be so hasty, Charlotte told him. If we tried, Haribel's Fraxian would try and stop us. As if they could, Vega said. Once their leader and their human friend are defeated, they won't have any will to oppose us, Findor said. This oasis will be destroyed regardless, so for now let us witness His Majesty's great power against those who oppose him. Mila Rose scowled at them in disgust. How fitting that Berrigan's Fraxian are just as arrogant as he is. I don't like this, Apache said warily. We should help. After all the training we've been doing, standing on the sidelines like this is just... I know how you feel, Apache, Sung Sun replied in a surprisingly empathetic way. But at the same time, I find myself wondering if maybe Ben's help will be more than enough. Mila Rose and Apache gaped at their teammate. I guess I can't blame you for that, Mila Rose finally admitted as Big Chill and Haribel faced down Berrigan. So, I guess, for now, we wait until we're certain they really do need us, and keep Berrigan's Fraxian from butting in. Agreed, Sung Sun said. Apache clenched her fists, still upset at the fact that they weren't helping. Come on, she said finally, let's give them some space. The girls moved back to avoid the impending battle. HMPH, Berrigan snapped his fingers. His Fraxian pulled out cloaks that Big Chill hadn't seen them with earlier, producing what seemed to be a bunch of bones from within. The bones flew towards Berrigan, emerging together to form a large throne. Big Chill was about to make a witty retort when Berrigan jammed a hand into the throne. With a solid tug, he removed a colossal axe, shattering the throne in the process. It wasn't as big as Enoitra's weapon, but it was still very intimidating. Big Chill went on the offensive first, flying at Berrigan and preparing to freeze him only for something unexpected to happen. His body was starting to slow down. And it wasn't because he was tired, his body was just moving slower. Berrigan backhanded him with enough force that Big Chill was amazed that his head was still attached to his shoulders as he was sprawled on the ground. Berrigan swung his axe, only for Haribel to appear in front of him, blocking the axe with notable effort. Ugh, Big Chill rubbed his aching cheek. What was that? He asked himself. But he had no time for an answer as yellow energy began gathering in the hollowed part of Haribel's sword. With a burst of strength, she pushed Berrigan back before charging forward to slash him. However, the same thing that happened to Big Chill was happening to her. She was suddenly slowing down upon closing with Baragon. He was about to bring his axe down when another flash of green light drew his attention. Big Chill was gone, and in his place was XLR8, who quickly ran by and pulled Harable away from the impending danger. "Thank you, Ben," Harable said, keeping her eyes on Baragon, who was looking at them with disinterest. "How is he doing that?" XLR8 asked. "It's his special power," Harable said bitterly. When XLR8 tilted his head at her, she elaborated. "Baragon possesses powers over time." "Oh," XLR8 said. Then he slumped. "Well, that's a little unfair. Wait, he can control time, but he's only the second Espada." "The Espada are only ranked in terms of their spiritual pressure," Baragon reminded him, annoyance in his voice towards his rank. "Just because Stark has more than me, doesn't mean his abilities can match mine. Nothing can. My power, the power of time, of aging, is the only thing that is absolute." "Okay," XLR8 mumbled to himself. "I really should have thought this through. Though I can see why he's so arrogant now. And why he used to rule Hugo Mundo with a power like that." "It can't be helped," Harable said as she stood up. "I was hoping to find some sort of opening in his power, but he might just be untouchable." "This battle is over," Baragon said with absolute conviction. "Though you are welcome to try any tricks you think can save you. Go ahead, Ben-10. See if you have an alien in that little trinket of yours that can stand up to my power." XLR8 scowled. This reminded him a little bit of his first adventure with Paradox. Harable's Fraxian watched anxiously while Baragon's grinned with satisfaction. Baragon casually raised his axe with one arm and brought it down. Harable and XLR8 just managed to avoid the blow, which kicked up lots of sand in its wake. XLR8 zoomed behind Baragon and moved in to kick his enemy, only to feel his body slow down once more. "Did you think that my power only worked in front of me?" Baragon asked as he grabbed XLR8 by the leg, swung him overhead, and slammed him face first into the ground. "Ben!" Apache cried, preparing to jump in to help, only for Mila Rose to grab her by the collar. "Don't be foolish," Mila Rose hissed at her. "You'll just get in the way." "Are you saying we're supposed to let Baragon do this?" Apache demanded. "Of course not," Mila Rose retorted. "But what do you expect to do against a power like that?" Apache bit her lip. Mila Rose looked back at the fight, trying her best to keep a straight face. XLR8 groaned as he pushed himself up. So speed was out, and it was safe to say that muscle wouldn't be much help either. If he did have some sort of time alien in his Ultimatrix, XLR8 was certain he hadn't unlocked it yet. Was there anything short of Alien X that was capable of dealing with this guy? "Such a shame," Baragon said as he strolled towards the hero's fallen form. "I was actually hoping you could provide me with some entertainment, but it seems unlikely. Oh well, I shall end this fight immediately." "Hola Azul." Baragon titled his head as a projectile of yellow energy shot past him. He turned towards the source, Harable, who was pointing her sword at him. "Hola Azul, a special technique that belongs only to you, Harable," he said. "You can gather spiritual energy into your sword, using it to not only enhance the power of your blade, but also fire it as a long-range projectile. A versatile ability, but it still pales in comparison to my own power." Harable did not respond, settling on glaring at her opponent. "For what it's worth, Harable, you have always been someone of interest to me," he continued, showing how little concern he actually had for this fight, even going as far as to hoist his axe over his shoulder. "Powerful, graceful, and quite intimidating if pushed. You would have been a great subordinate under my command." "I refused to serve under you then, and I still do," Harable told him coldly. "Lord Aizen is the only one I serve." "HMPH," Baragon raised his axe again. "So be it. I shall not kill you, Harable, but I will make sure you learn to never stand against me again." "Fight's not over yet, Baragon," XLR8, rising up to his feet. Baragon simply looked over his shoulder with disinterest. "After witnessing my power, you still wish to fight me. Your tenacity is impressive, but you must realize that it's futile by now." XLR8 lifted up his visor so that Baragon could see his smiling face. "Now how many times have I heard that before? Okay, to be fair, not many people I've fought actually used the word, but I'm sure that's what they meant." "Is this how you intend to defeat me?" Baragon asked rhetorically. Driving me to boredom with your ceaseless prattle? Nope, XLR8 replied. But it's a nice perk. Apache's body was shaking. She wanted to help out, somehow, but she was worried that Mila Rose and Sung Sun would prevent her from doing so. But she refused to just stand by. She wanted to aid Lady Harrible, help Ben, and protect the oasis. Just then she got an idea. Spinning around before Mila Rose and Sung Sun could register what was going on, she plucked one of the fruits off its tree. Lady Harrible, she called over to her leader, getting everyone's attention. Catch, she threw the fruit at Harrible, whose eyes widened when she realized what her Fraxian's plan was. She went to grab it only to be struck by the flat of Berrigan's axe as he struck a hand out and grabbed the fruit instead. Apache froze in horror. Nice work, Apache, Mila Rose growled. Berrigan eyed the fruit with disdain. Did you think a little boost in power would help you? Perhaps you need a demonstration of my power to understand how feeble you really are. Sure enough, the fruit began to darken, shriveling up and drooping before it was little more than a small black lump, like a deflated ball, in Berrigan's palm. He squashed the aged fruit into a glob of mush in his hands. XLR8 winced as he witnessed this. Slowing down time was bad enough, but he could see Berrigan was being serious when he talked about the power of aging. Which of his aliens could possibly stand up against Berrigan's power? The guy was practically untouchable. Do you see now how helpless you are? Berrigan asked, raising his axe for another swing. XLR8 tapped the Omnitrix again, transforming into Diamond Head and slamming his fist into the ground, creating a wall of crystal that separated him and Harrible from Berrigan. He doubted it would hold the guy long, but at least it could give them a quick breather. Berrigan looked at the wall in boredom. What is this? Trying to buy yourself some time? Such an action is like spitting in the face of God. He put his hand on the crystal and began to focus his power. Everyone expected it to crumble like the fruit, only for nothing notable to occur. Berrigan's eye widened at this. What is this? He tried again, but still the crystal wall was unchanged. Why is nothing happening? Everyone else was stunned, staring at the wall in disbelief, Harrible turning her head towards her alien ally. Ben, she said, her words struggling to form as her mind was still comprehending what she was seeing. The diamonds created from your diamond head form cannot age. That means you are immune to Berrigan's power. Huh, Diamond Head looked at his hands in wonder before a cocky grin split his face. Looks like we've got an edge. One of his aliens can resist Lord Berrigan's power over aging, Findor muttered. And no way, Vega stammered. Nothing can stand against His Majesty's power, Ritter said in disbelief. Nuo, Berrigan roared in anger and denial. Impossible, impossible. There is nothing in all of existence that can withstand my power. Aging is absolute. Diamond Head chuckled, filled with newfound confidence. Well, it looks like diamonds are forever. Berrigan glared at the wall, imagining the look on the hero's face at this revelation. You little ant, I will show you. No, you won't. Diamond Head slammed his hands back onto the ground. A crystal pillar rose up from underneath Berrigan. The move distracted him long enough for Diamond Head to lower the crystal wall and tackle him. Although he could feel himself slowing down, the proximity between him and Berrigan, combined with the Espada's disbelief over something being immune to his powers, left him too stunned to realize the danger. Berrigan's eye bulged when he finally realized the current situation. His teeth ground together, his fist clenched the hilt of his axe so tightly that it began to tremble, and his entire face looked like he was ready to explode. You abomination, Berrigan roared. You cannot exist. You cannot exist. He swung his axe at Diamond Head, who, thanks to Berrigan's power, was unable to do anything except let the attack hit him. Although his crystalline body blocked the blow, the sheer force once again brought him to his knees. Berrigan's spiritual pressure flared wildly, forcing the others to their knees as well. Diamond Head noticed this out of the corner of his eye, though he also noticed Harrible slowly making her way over to the other two combatants. Diamond Head wondered if she was able to use her own spiritual pressure to counter Berrigan's, though his power to slow time was probably affecting her as well. This deduction gave Diamond Head an idea. Man, SCK to be you, he taunted the second Espada. You were so full of yourself and here I come along and it turns out your powers doesn't work on me. That's just sad. Berrigan's face contained nothing but pure rage at the crystalline being before him. Hold your tongue, you insignificant trash. You used some sort of trick. Claiming that your crystals cannot age is arrogance to the finest degree. I applaud you for your showmanship. For a moment I honestly believed that you could somehow resist my power. Diamond Head simply smirked. Wow, lying to yourself just so you can feel better. You've probably reached an all-time low. Berrigan, what's the matter? Can't really fight without your fancy time powers helping you? Berrigan snarled as he increased both his spiritual pressure and the pressure on his axe. Diamond Head cringed from both assaults, though another sound worried him. He looked at the pillar Berrigan was partially imprisoned in and noticed small, thin cracks begin to form. Berrigan's sheer spiritual pressure was affecting the crystals. Berrigan noticed Diamond Head's looked and followed his line of sight. What he saw caused his fierce visage to drop back into calm arrogance. So, your diamonds are not unbreakable. Good. He raised his axe. You're too dangerous to let live, BEN10. Aizen was a fool to ever let you into our ranks, so I shall rectify that mistake. But just as he prepared to swing his axe, he suddenly cried out in pain. He had been so distracted by Diamond Head that he failed to realize HAREM had been getting closer and closer. But, aware that Berrigan's time powers would hinder her regardless of her opening, she decided to simply hold her blade out in front of her as she made her way towards him. Fortunately, Diamond Head's taunting, combined with Berrigan's desperate refusal to believe anything could halt his power. The former Lord of Hugomundo never realized she was there until her blade impaled him through his shoulder. Howling in pain, Berrigan dropped his axe, turning his head to see who had attacked him. HAREM, he thundered. HAREM glared at him with narrow eyes. Lady HAREM, Apache cried happily. She did it, Miller Rose exclaimed. Diamond Head quickly took advantage of HAREM's attack to back away from Berrigan before giving a thumbs up to the third espada. Great job, HAREM. It was thanks to you that I was even able to attack, HAREM complimented him before glaring at Berrigan. That was for threatening me, my Fraxian. She looked over at Diamond Head and her expression softened. And my friend. Diamond Head smiled in response. Lord Berrigan, his Fraxian cried out, unable to believe that their leader was capable of being injured. Yeah, Apache punched the air. You did it, you hurt him. I never thought I would see this day, Sung Sun whispered to herself. Miller Rose grinned as she put a hand on her hip. That Ben, no matter what happens, he always finds a way to surprise us. Impossible, Berrigan said, staring at HAREM. You hurt me. Why, you can't. We have, HAREM said firmly before looking over at Berrigan's Fraxian. All of them flinched at the intense look she was giving them. This fight is over. Leave now and I will not inform Lord Aizen of your treacherous actions. Diamond Head gave them another cocky grin and made a show of cracking his knuckles. Unless you guys want to go a few rounds with me. Berrigan's Fraxian looked conflicted. No doubt it was because they wanted to avenge the slight against their MSTR, but at the same time knew exactly who they were up against. DMNU, Vega growled. What do you think you're doing? Berrigan asked, glaring over at his Fraxian. You would surrender to them? Like cowards? Lord Berrigan, Findor started to say. Stop them and destroy this oasis, Berrigan shouted at them. He turned his head towards HAREM. You think you have won because you managed to hurt me, HAREM? How presumptuous of you. He started reaching for her, only for HAREM to twist the blade in his shoulder, causing him to grunt in pain. Lord Berrigan, his Fraxian cried out. Come on, Vega shouted at his teammates. If we all gang up on HAREM, we can take... He was unable to finish his sentence before Miller Rose appeared beside him with Sunito, just barely missing him when she brought her sword down. If you want to get to Lady HAREM, she said with a feral grin on her face. You'll have to get through us first, Apache said as she unclipped her chakrams and threw them. Berrigan's Fraxian split in different directions to avoid the incoming projectiles. Redder sneered at them. You think you can take us on? He raised his wings, but before he could fire his feathers, he found himself under attack from a flurry of shards, courtesy of Diamond Head. How does it feel when your plan gets turned on you? Diamond Head chuckled. Redder, Charlotte, Findor called. Focus on Tennyson, we'll deal with HAREM's Fraxian. HMPH, Sung Sun said as she casually pulled out her sai. My, how confident you are. How about we show you the results of our training? Vega laughed. You think a little bit of training will make you a match for us? Why don't you find out? Miller Rose challenged, raising her sword. Right, Charlotte replied to Findor. Alrighty, Ben, get ready, appealing Charlotte's ultra-sexy. But Diamond Head slammed his hands onto the ground, a large crystal bursting out toward Charlotte, who gawked when he saw the crystal explode into a fletch storm of shards. Charlotte hissed as the shards struck him. He angrily glared down at Diamond Head. How dare you attack me while I was in the middle of calling out my attack? Do you have any idea how long your attack names are? Diamond Head responded before firing another barrage of shards. This time Charlotte dodged out of the way before using Sunito to appear right beside his opponent, throwing out a kick, which Diamond Head blocked. He was about to attack when he saw Redder above him, preparing an attack of his own. Quickly, Diamond Head grabbed Charlotte by his outstretched leg, and before the flamboyant Arankar could do anything, Diamond Head tossed him straight at Redder. The avian Arankar was so stunned by this unexpected move that he did nothing to prevent Charlotte from colliding with him in midair, causing both to fall to the ground. Diamond Head chuckled for a moment before frowning. Man, I thought these guys would back down once we get the better of Barrigan, but it looks like they're just too loyal. I guess I better stick to knocking Charlotte out and see if that gets rid of these thorns. Where are the girls? He looked up and noticed that Apache, Miller Rose, and Sung Sun had been surrounded by Vega, Findor, Parduauk, and Pawa. He prepared to jump in until he was suddenly tackled by Redder. Don't take your eyes off of me, Tennyson, Redder yelled. Miller Rose, Apache, and Sung Sun eyed their opponents warily. Pawa remained as stoic as ever. Vega and Parduauk were both smug, while Findor had a less arrogant but still confident smile on his face. So, Pawa said nonchalantly, how shall we deal with these three? There's 4 of us and only 3 of them, Findor stated. Should perhaps one of us sit this out? You can if you want, Findor, Parduauk told him. But I'm not passing up a chance to fight some hot ladies. You 3 probably should have stuck with Tennyson, Vega said to the girls. You might have stood a chance, but now there's no hope for you. We've heard that you've been training with Tennyson, but nothing about whether or not you've actually beaten him, Pawa added. If you can't even defeat him, what makes you think you stand a chance against us? During this banter, all 3 girls regarded their enemies with disinterest. At first the males chalked it up to weak bravado in the face of danger, but when the girls continued looking at them nonchalantly, it started to unnerve and irritate them. What's with those looks? Vega demanded. You really think you're better than us? If you're going to insult us, Miller Rose said coolly, at least make sure you get your facts straight. Sure, we haven't had the best of luck with Ben, Apache admitted. But those were just spars, so of course we all hold back, Ben included. However, Sung Sun added, lowering her head, this is an actual fight, plus you and your MSTR are nothing more than scum. All 3 girls glared. So there's no reason for us to go easy on you. Suddenly all 3 shot off in a blur. Before anyone could register what had happened, Findor was disarmed by Sung Sun's sai, slashed across the chest by Miller Rose's sword and hamstrung courtesy of Apache's chakrams. His comrades all stared in shock at this sudden attack. Since you like sealing so much of your power with your mask, Findor, Sung Sun said, that makes you the weakest one here right now. Findor grit his teeth in pain as he fell on his back. Apache shot towards him before flipping up into the air. Findor only had enough time to open his mouth in shock before Apache dive-bombed him with her fist. The blow strong enough to cause him to cough up BLD before falling into unconsciousness. Findor! Vega shouted before Apache's chakrams flew towards him. He ducked under them only to barely dodge Sung Sun stabbing his face, and lunging forward when Miller Rose tried to slash him from behind. Pawa moved to attack them, SWNGNG a massive fist. All 3 girls dodged before launching themselves at him simultaneously. Pawa blocked Miller Rose's sword, though he winced as he felt her cut his arm, swung his other hand at an incoming Sung Sun. But his eyes widened as he felt Apache's chakrams slice into his back. The pain left him open for Sung Sun to strike him across the face, stunning him long enough for Miller Rose to slash his leg, causing him to stumble. Gritting his teeth, Pawa tried to push himself back up, only for all three girls to strike him simultaneously. More BLD burst from his newest wounds as he toppled over onto the ground. Unbelievable, Vega muttered. Instead of fighting one-on-one, all three are attacking one of us at a time. I believe, as Findor would say, exacta, Miller Rose said with a grin. What? Vega tried taunting them. Are you three so weak that you all need to gang up on one target? I thought you said you were the strongest numeros in all of Hugo Mundo, Sung Sun pointed out. Surely 3 weak girls wouldn't be too much trouble for a single member of the Fraxian belonging to the mighty Baragon. You beach, Vega shouted. Vega, no, Parduok tried to warn his comrade as he charged at the three. But he was so blinded by his anger that the three were able to slash him simultaneously just as they had with Pawa. Vega. Diamenu, Vega cursed before Sung Sun struck him in the back of his neck with the flat side of her sai. He collapsed as well. Parduok's jaw hung open as he tried to register what was happening before his eyes. His teammates, the proud followers of Lord Baragon, had been taken out in no time at all. Man, Apache said, putting a hand on her hip. That was kinda disappointing. Were they really that weak? Or did we get that much stronger? While we have improved, Sung Sun said, they did outnumber us, and we don't know how costly this fight would have been if we all released ourselves. We took them down so easily because those fools weren't expecting us to rush them one at a time. That, combined with their arrogance, allowed us to take them down quickly. TCH, Apache looked over at Parduok. Down to 1, huh? Wonder if he's got any fight in him. Parduok was understandably nervous after witnessing the defeat of his teammates, but the girls' conversation had given him confidence. So the only reason you 3 won was because you took them by surprise, he chuckled as he reached for his Zanpakuto. That means, since you won't be able to take me by surprise, you don't stand a chance. All 3 girls looked at him with their eyes half closed. Is he serious? Apache asked. He's trying to make himself feel better, Miller Rose said with a shrug. You 2 can go help Ben if you want, I'll handle this guy. Parduok gripped his Zanpakuto tightly. I'll teach you 3 to look down on us. All 3 girls shifted into defensive stances, but Parduok never managed to attack them because at that moment, something crashed into him, kicking up sand everywhere. The girls were only able to stare in confusion at what had just occurred before the figure that struck Parduok picked itself up. Ugh, Diamond Head rubbed his cranium before gazing up. Charlotte and Redder hovered over him, both grinning down maliciously at the alien hero. Ben, Apache called, running to his side. Are you all right? I'm fine, Diamond Head said as he got back to his feet. Are you seriously having trouble with these guys, Ben? Miller Rose asked, eyeing the last 2 of Baragon's Fraxian. These guys have been sticking to keeping their distance or using hit-and-run tactics, Diamond Head explained. Redder specializes in long-ranged aerial combat, so it's no surprise, Sung Sun said as she stared up at the 2. Charlotte was about to comment when he saw the defeated forms of his teammates lying on the ground. What? You guys lost? What gives? Redder shouted down at them. Huh? Diamond Head looked around. Whoa. You took these guys out fast. Nice to see that our training has been put to good use, Miller Rose said to him. Just then they heard a groaning off to the side. Turning, the 4 saw that Parduok was starting to pick himself up. Excuse me, Apache said before walking over to Parduok. She raised her foot and slammed her heel into the back of his neck, fully sending him into the realm of unconsciousness. Good job, was all Diamond Head could say, earning a grin from Apache. Diamond Head then shifted his attention back to his airborne adversaries. Guess all we need to do now is deal with these 2. Want some help? Miller Rose offered. Nah, I got this, Diamond Head reassured her. The last standing members of Baragon's Fraxian scowled at Diamond Head. I don't know how you did it, but now it falls to us to avenge Lord Baragon's honor, Redder declared. This has gone on quite long enough, Charlotte said as he struck a pose, flexing his muscles. As a princess, I declare you all must fall. Well, sorry to disappoint you, Princess, Diamond Head said as he brought his hands together. But it's time you were overthrown. Harible's Fraxian watched in fascination as Diamond Head created what appeared to be a large, chain, crystalline hook. Step back, Diamond Head advised the girls. They quickly retreated backwards as Diamond Head spun the giant hook over his head before sending it flying at Redder. The hook struck Redder in the side, sending him barreling into Charlotte, who he grabbed in a blind panic, the force sending them both towards the lake of the oasis. Grinning, Diamond Head yanked on the hook's chain, pulling both Arrancar straight towards him. As their momentum carried the two towards him, Diamond Head raised another wall of crystal out of the ground. Both Arrancar only had enough time to widen their eyes before they collided with the wall with a resounding thud. Apache threw back her head with laughter, Mila Rose chuckled softly, and Sung Sun giggled behind her hand at the display. Diamond Head lowered the wall as Redder and Charlotte slumped to the ground, dazed but still remotely conscious. The two froze when they saw Diamond Head's feet before them. Slowly, they looked up, seeing Diamond Head grin down at them. Sweat ran down their foreheads. Diamond Head grabbed Charlotte by his shirt and Redder by his feathers, hoisted both off the ground, and proceeded to slam their heads together. Finally, Diamond Head muttered as his opponents slumped unconscious in his grasp. He dropped them both unceremoniously before tapping the Ultimatrix dial, transforming back into his human self. "Nice one, Ben," Mila Rose said. "We all knew you could make walls, but I didn't know you could make other stuff out of crystal like that." "Yeah, Diamond Head's pretty versatile," Ben said. "Well done," Harable said, still standing in the same spot she had been, her blade still piercing Berrigan's flesh. She looked to the side, noticing that the black thorns were starting to disappear. Berrigan himself, on the other hand, was staring at the fallen forms of his underlings. "It can't be. My Fraxian, my warriors, defeated by the likes of them. The arrogance of you and yours has become your downfall, Berrigan," Harable said coolly. She pulled her blade out, Berrigan hissing as he felt it leave his body. He reached over his shoulder to feel the wound, but Harable paid him no mind as she walked over to Ben and her girls. "Glad that's over," Ben said, putting his hands in his pockets before pausing. He walked over to the plants and started inspecting them. After a moment he let out a sigh of relief. "Okay, so far I don't see any damage." "That's good," Apache said as she reattached her chakrams to her wrists. "I don't understand why Berrigan thought this would work," Mila Rose commented as she sheathed her sword. "Even if he destroyed all these fruits, Lord Aizen could have just had Shale and Ben make new ones. Was he planning to constantly destroy them and hope Lord Aizen would just give up?" "It's possible that he didn't think that far ahead," Sung Sun pointed out, her sigh disappearing into her sleeve. "Maybe he was just so focused on getting rid of these fruits that it didn't occur to him." "Ha," Apache scoffed. "Pretty stupid if you ask me." "Well, bottom line is that everything worked out," Ben said. "Thanks for all your help." Then he remembered what Harable said earlier and grinned at her. "So, now you see me as a friend, huh?" At first, Harable said nothing, merely crossing her arms and gazing at him. Ben wondered if maybe he had pushed his luck too far. "You have treated my subordinates and myself with courtesy, respect, and kindness. You were uncomfortable about our existence but did not judge us, and you have put your own life on the life for our sakes. So yes, I see you as a friend." Then, in a surprising moment of playfulness, she added, "If that is all right with you." Ben simply grinned while her Fraxian gaped at their leader. They had seen many sides of their leader, but nothing remotely close to playfulness. They turned their heads in wonder at Ben, who was still grinning at Harable, amazed at bringing out a new side to their leader. "One thing I don't get though," Ben said as a thought occurred to him, "is why Berrigan wanted to destroy the fruits instead of hogging them all to himself. I honestly thought he was going to try and use them to overthrow Aizen. Does he really believe in survival of the fittest that much?" Harable looked over her shoulder at Berrigan, who was still wrapped up to his waist in crystal, clutching his bleeding wound and staring at his fallen followers. "While I don't doubt that he believes in that philosophy," Harable spoke up, "I believe he had another reason for wishing these plants destroyed." When the others looked at her expectantly, she continued, "I believe he feared the fruits could be used against him." Ben and the girls blinked at this revelation. "Okay, that actually makes a lot more sense," Ben admitted. "It's possible that he did consider using the fruits against Lord Aizen," Harable added. "But as I said, he possibly feared that we, perhaps even Lord Aizen himself, would use the fruits to counter him. So Berrigan probably figured that if he couldn't have them all to himself, nobody could," Ben realized. That's my theory, anyway, Harable admitted. I don't think we need to worry about Berrigan, Apache said before slapping Ben's back playfully, the hero stumbling. If that old fart acts up again, Ben can just go diamond head on him. Let's not get cocky, Apache, Ben cautioned her. This got her attention. If Ben was being cautious, this had to be serious. Berrigan's time powers seem to be his ace in the hole, but I'm pretty sure he's got plenty of other powers to fall back on, and I don't know if diamond head alone will be enough. I agree, Ben, Harable said, respecting Ben's strategic thinking. She then addressed her Fraxian. Also, girls, I'm proud of all three of you. Today you have shown not only the capabilities of your teamwork, but also the effect that sparring with Ben has had on you. You did excellent today. I'll say, Ben said. I only saw parts of the fight since I was focused on Redder and Charlotte, but from what I saw, you three were awesome. They never even saw you coming. Apache sported a cocky grin, Miller rose a proud smile, and Sung Sun covered her mouth with her sleeve again. Ben laughed heartily while Harable remained silent, though there was visible pride in her eyes. Impossible. The five turned towards Berrigan, his entire body shaking. Impossible, he growled. Oh, man, Ben grumbled. This isn't good. What was your first clue? Apache snarked. Impossible, Berrigan roared. His spiritual power flared immensely, shattering his crystal entrapment. He faced Ben and the girls, his face more livid than they had seen yet. You worthless ants, Berrigan howled at them. You dare try to make a fool out of me. Harable narrowed her eyes. She had never seen Berrigan this enraged before, and it didn't bode well for them. I will teach all of you your place, Berrigan vowed as he made his way towards them. Harable held her blade out protectively. Don't be foolish, Berrigan. Your spiritual pressure will be sensed by everyone at this rate. Do you really wish to invoke Lord Aizen's judgment upon you? Berrigan said nothing, merely gnashing his teeth as he glared at Harable. He's too angry to listen to reason, Miller Rose noted. We wounded his pride, Sung Sun replied. And now he wants revenge. Okay, Ben, Apache said. You should probably go diamond head now. Why, yeah, I think you're right, Ben said as he started reaching for the Ultimatrix. Harable looked towards her Fraxian. Girls, get to safety. You know what? Just as Ben was about to activate the Ultimatrix, Berrigan launched himself towards them. Harable, watch out! Berrigan was directly in front of them now, having reached them with Sunito. Harable's eyes widened as Berrigan shot his fist outward. Assuming that Berrigan had targeted her first, Harable raised her blade to block him, only for Berrigan's arm to pass her in favor of the target beside her. Ben only had enough time to raise his arms in a block when he felt Berrigan's fist connect. He cried out as pain exploded in his arms and sickening cracks exploded in his ears. The force knocked him off his feet, blasting him into the sand. Starting with you, Berrigan declared. Ben clenched his teeth in pain as he weakly attempted to sit up. He tried using the Ultimatrix only to shut his eyes tight from how much pain his arms were in. He had a strong feeling that they were both broken. Ben, Apache, Mila rose, and Sung Sun yelled in concern. Harable rounded on Berrigan, her eyes shining with ferocity. You! She swung her blade at Berrigan, only to chide herself as she felt her body slowing down. Berrigan grabbed her by the arm. I'll deal with you in a moment, he told her coldly before shoving her back and to the ground. Harable winced as the force almost dislocated her arm. She looked up to see Berrigan slowly approaching Ben. Apache, Mila rose, and Sung Sun quickly pulled out their weapons and stood before their enemy. Get away from him, Apache threatened. Berrigan glared at her with contempt. Do you wish to die first? He asked. Mila Rose raised her sword. We won't let you hurt Ben or Lady Harable, she declared. HMPH, Berrigan snorted. Worthless ants, all of you. You shall pay for your defiance as you watch me remind this pathetic human how insignificant he is. Despite knowing the odds were against them, all three girls lunged at Berrigan. Pointless, Berrigan muttered as the girls began moving towards him at a slower pace. He backhanded all three in one blow, blasting them backwards. DMNU, Apache cursed, rubbing her jaw. Berrigan ignored her as he stood directly above Ben. Breathing deeply, Ben looked up at the second espada with all the courage he could despite his pain. In the end, This is all you amounted to, Berrigan said as he reached out. Ben, Harable whispered in fear. No, Miller Rose shouted. Leave him alone, Sung Sun screamed. Suddenly a new pressure came upon them, one even greater than what Berrigan was emitting. In fact, the Espada himself seemed frozen in place by the sheer force of the pressure. Berrigan, said a Rancor turned as he was addressed, his eye widening at the voice. Standing behind him was none other than Stark himself, and he was given one of the deepest scowls that had ever been shown on the normally apathetic Espada's face. Get away from Ben, Stark told him. Now. The other Arankar stared at him in shock. Stark never gave orders. Sure, he might snap at Lilinet for something, but he never made a command like this. To Apache, Miller Rose, and Sung Sun, he seemed even more intense than when he had confronted Anoitra during the 5th Espada's first fight with Ben. Berrigan quickly overcame his shock. You dare order me, Stack? Well, I happen to outrank you, so yeah, I dare, Stark said testily, and yet again, the others were taken aback by his sudden attitude. Not keeping his eyes off of Berrigan, he addressed the other present Espada. Harable, are you okay? I'm fine, Harable said, quickly rising to her feet. Out of all of us, Ben is the most wounded. I think both of his arms are broken, possibly shattered. If he hadn't blocked at the last second. Harable stopped, though the implications were there all the same. I see, Stark said coldly, his eyes narrowing. Harable, I know I don't have any right to ask this, but could you please take Ben to safety? Wait, Apache shouted, running over to Ben. Swampfire can regenerate, right? We can just have Ben turn into him and everything will be all right. She grabbed the Ultimatrix and ran her hands along the centerpiece, trying to get it to activate. She quickly became frustrated over her lack of progress. Ka, how do you work this thing? She yanked on the Ultimatrix, thereby yanking Ben's arm. Ah, he cried out from the burst of pain. Apache. She flinched. Sorry, Ben. She let go of the Ultimatrix, which caused Ben's arm to fall to the ground, causing him to cry out again. Ah, sorry. Apache, you idiot, Miller Rose shouted testily. Are you trying to kill him? I was just trying to help, Apache snapped. Which is more than I can say for you. What was that? Miller Rose growled. Girls, Harable said firmly. Get Ben to safety first. I'll stay here with Stark and... It's okay, Harable, Stark said, causing the third Espada to falter. Go with Ben and your Fraxian. I'll deal with Berrigan. For the third time, the other Arankar were stunned, though Berrigan quickly regained himself. You'll deal with me? What is this, Stark? He questioned. This uncharacteristic behavior of yours, is it really all for the sake of a mere charge? I'll only say this once, Berrigan, Stark said, not rising to the other's taunts. Back off. It seemed that the reminder of wounding Ben helped bolster his confidence because all Berrigan did was smirk at Static, flaring his own spiritual pressure to counter the Primera Espadas. No. Harable looked back and forth between them uneasily. She feared that if the two most powerful Espada were to come to blows in the confines of Las Noches, nothing would be left standing. She felt that she needed to intervene, perhaps even aid Stack however she could win. That would be unwise of you, Berrigan. Both Stack and Berrigan's spiritual pressure stopped immediately as they, Harable, her Fraxian, and Ben turned to see Aizen standing before them. Gone was the smile that usually donned his face. His mouth was a thin line as he studied the surrounding area, namely Berrigan's unconscious Fraxian and a wounded Ben, before his eyes settled on Berrigan. Would you care to tell me what happened here? Berrigan said nothing, merely looking at the Soul Reaper who had dethroned him. Am I to assume that this was simply a sparring match gone awry? Aizen asked, though his tone indicated his skepticism. He shot a glance at Ben. Or perhaps you decided to do what Anoitra, Grimjow, and Luppy have done before you, Berrigan. This had nothing to do with the boy, Berrigan said evenly. He just got in the way. You liar, Apache shrieked. Lord Aizen, Harable said. Berrigan, he. Perhaps Ben got in the way, initially, Aizen said, cutting Harable off, as he looked over at the trees. His eyes landed on a particular spot where the squashed remains of the fruit Berrigan had aged still laid. Berrigan scowled when he noticed what Aizen was looking at. But then you were tired of him getting in the way and decided to take your anger out on him instead. Berrigan didn't even try to defend himself. He simply kept his mouth shut, glaring at Aizen with all his might, as if hoping he could strike the Soul Reaper down with emotion alone. Aizen muttered to himself as he looked down at Berrigan's Fraxion before looking over at Haribel's. Then he smiled. Well, it seems your Fraxion's training has done wonders, Haribel. Yours have defeated Berrigan's. I'm impressed. Berrigan growled under his breath, his fists clenched tightly. His free arm shifted over to his wound and Aizen noticed this as well. A minuscule moment of surprise crossed his face. Berrigan, you're wounded? Stark's eyes widened and Berrigan's body shook at both the reminder and the fact that it had been revealed to more people. Both Static and Aizen looked at Haribel. It was me, she admitted before walking over towards Ben. Though I could not have done it without Ben's help. Really now? Aizen asked, following Haribel as he asked. That's right, Lord Aizen, Apache contributed. Turns out Ben's form Diamond Head can't be affected by Berrigan's aging powers. That actually caused Aizen to falter in his steps. He can't be affected at all? He looked back over his shoulder towards the fighting grounds and noticing the shards littering parts of the ground. No, sir, Mila Rose added. We all saw it. Ben was able to trap Berrigan in crystal, and then distracted him long enough to allow Lady Haribel to wound him. Aizen resumed his pace, kneeling down beside Ben. Well now, your aliens continue to surprise me, Ben. He ran a critical eye along Ben's arms and frowned, as if he was able to figure out the damage just by looking. Did you know that Diamond Head could do that? Can't say I did, Ben replied, trying to sit up as best he could, wincing whenever his arms moved even the slightest. Never fought anyone who could age things. How interesting, Aizen said. But for now, Ben requires medical attention immediately. We were trying to help him turn into Swampfire, Apache explained. But we don't know how to work the Ultimatrix. I see, Aizen said, looking at the Ultimatrix. Perhaps he placed a hand on the Ultimatrix dial, exactly the same way Ben did, and lightly turned it. The dial popped open, displaying the holographic image of human Gaussor. How did you do that, Lord Aizen? Sung Sun inquired. After seeing Ben use it, I thought imitating his hand motions would provide the same result. Aizen explained. Fortunately, I was right. Now, let me see. Where's Swampfire? Aizen started turning the dial, browsing through Echo, Water Hazard, Goop, and Cannonbolt. Ben couldn't help but feel uneasy. Just by watching him a few times, Aizen was able to activate the Ultimatrix with ease. He already knew the guy was smart, but he was starting to realize how much he might have underestimated the rogue Shinigami. Ah, here we go, Aizen said as he finally reached Swampfire's image. Now I believe I just need to. He pushed the dial down, unflinching as green light filled his vision. Thanks, Swampfire said after the light passed. He looked down and grimaced at what he saw. His arms had become shriveled and twisted. Oh, man. He tried to move his arms, only to grit his teeth when the pain started taking effect. What happened to your arms? Apache gaped. Swampfire can regenerate, so why aren't your arms healed? It would appear that any damage Ben receives in his human form is carried over to his aliens, Aizen said as he studied Swampfire's arms. Perhaps the reason why Swampfire did not regenerate is because of the difference in biology. Difference in biology? Swampfire asked. That's right. I'm going to assume that Swampfire does not have bones like your human form, and therefore cannot recognize pain from damage unfamiliar to his own body, so he cannot not heal from it on his own. Or, maybe, you can only regenerate when wounded as Swampfire. Swampfire groaned, slumping back onto the ground. So much for that idea. It's not hopeless, Ben, Aizen reassured him. For I have a suggestion, but I won't deny it is risky. Swampfire became nervous. What would that be? If Swampfire is unable to heal your arms, Aizen said, perhaps it would be easier if we simply cut them off and allow you to regenerate new ones. Swampfire flinched while everyone else stared at Aizen. Well, everyone that Ben considered a friend here. Berrigan's eye was focused on Aizen's back. Stalk glanced at the other Espada, as if making sure he didn't try anything when everyone else was distracted. Is that a good idea, Lord Aizen? I don't see why not, Aizen answered. Though, if you are uncomfortable, we can simply take Ben to the infirmary if you wish. I'm leaving the choice to you though, Ben. Swampfire looked down at his arms. Aizen was giving him a choice, but if this way got his arms to heal faster. All right, he relented. Let's try it. Very well, Aizen said as he drew his sword. In one quick, he severed Swampfire's shriveled arms. The hero grit his teeth, but after that brief moment, the pain was gone from his body as new arms started immediately growing from his stumps. Once they had fully formed, Swampfire flexed his fingers. How do you feel? HAREM asked. I feel fine, Swampfire said, letting out a breath of relief. Good as new. Technically speaking, they are new, Sung's son pointed out. Swampfire made a face at her before chuckling. Good one. He pushed himself off the ground. Now for the moment of truth. He touched the Ultimatrix dial on his chest, transforming back to his normal self. Ben grinned. I feel great, he stretched his arms out. So glad that worked. HAREM's Fraxian let out their own breaths of relief while HAREM and Stuck relaxed their posture. Berrigan growled again at seeing Ben recover so easily. Aizen heard him however and turned back around, fixing the second espada with a most displeased look. Berrigan tried holding his ground, glaring back at Aizen. Ben, Stark, HAREM, the Soul Reaper said. Please leave now. Berrigan and I have much to talk about. There is nothing for us to discuss, Berrigan huffed, making his way towards his Fraxian, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. We'll be going. You may grant your Fraxian medical attention, Aizen said, but we are going to talk. Berrigan paused and Ben couldn't help feeling a slight shiver down his back at Aizen's tone. Aizen then turned towards their group and gave them a warm smile. Please don't hold yourselves up. I'll be with you shortly. Of course, Lord Aizen, HAREM said, immediately collecting herself. Ladies, come. Of course, Lady HAREM, Sung's son said, following after her leader with Apache and Miller rose right behind her. Understood, Stark added. He then took one more glance over at Berrigan before facing Ben. Come on. Right, Ben said, quickly following after Stark. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 10. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Bigby the Big Bad Wolf on fanfictionnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.